All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to dive into the different kinds of cap rates that you'll typically come across in commercial real estate. Let's get started. So first on the agenda is just simply to kind of lay the foundation, the groundwork that there are different kinds of cap rates based on perspective or the role that you have within the industry. And then from here, we'll dive into the four main kinds. So the overall cap rate, the equity cap rate, the lender's cap rate, and finally the terminal cap rate. So I know a lot of you are probably thinking, I thought there was only cap rate, and that's it. But believe it or not, there are different kinds of cap rates based on circumstance. So technically speaking, I think depending on where you are in the transaction or who you are within the transaction, you could describe your cap rate in a different way. So I think circumstance or perspective is going to be an important distinction when we begin to describe each one of these cap rates. But make no mistake, each one of these, even though they may have a different application, different circumstance or perspective, they are all measures of the relationship between risk and return. So that underlying definition of cap rate still holds true. I think all we're going to do is apply a different kind of perspective as we move through it. So let's dive into overall cap rate first. This is typically what most people think about whenever we have the conversation of cap rate. So this is also known as the going in cap rate or the entry cap rate. And this is the tried and true net operating income divided by price or value function. So the way that this would typically look either on your calculator or in a spreadsheet, or even just if you're doing mental math, is net operating income divided by value or price. So in this example, $100,000 divided by 1.2 million gives us 8.33%. All right, so the next is equity cap rate. And this cap rate measure is a little different in that we're only going to be measuring the cap rate on the equity contributed, not the total price or value. So another way to describe this is cash on cash return. And the way that we would calculate this is operating cash flow divided by equity contributed. So again, think about what this means. Instead of it being net operating income divided by price, it's operating cash flow divided by equity. The going in cap rate, the overall cap rate, tends to be unlevered. So it's that rate of return, it's that yield that does not account for the benefit or amplification of borrowing or debt or leverage. But the equity cap rate, cash on cash return, does. So as an example, we are ignoring NOI and price, and instead we're only looking at operating cash flow divided by equity contributed. And you'll notice that this equity cap rate, this cash on cash measure, is slightly higher than the going in cap rate, the overall cap rate, because we're benefiting from positive leverage. So next on the topic of leverage is the lender's cap rate. And so this is oftentimes described as the cap rate on money lent. So another way to describe this then, or another phrase that's used to describe this application is the debt yield. Lenders will oftentimes place a debt yield requirement to ensure that they are able to satisfy some of their underwriting guidelines or to satisfy that they have sufficient income relative to the amount of money that they're lending. And I think it's under that context where we can see the application of this formula. So it's NOI divided by loan amount. So again, coming back to our example, $100,000 divided by the amount that the lender gives us, let's say $820,000. So most lenders, at least these days, they're looking for between, call it 8 and 10, maybe sometimes 7 and change and 10% on a debt yield or lender's cap rate. And this measure really just helps them understand what that yield would be on the amount of money that they've lent. Now finally is what happens when you sell. Oftentimes we'll estimate the sales price using an exit cap rate or a terminal cap rate, sometimes also called a going out cap rate because you're exiting the investment. And so the function here, the formula here is NOI divided by expected sales price. So if we believe that NOI will be $106,000 a couple of years into the future, and we divide that by a terminal cap rate of our choosing, in this example 6.5%, then we can estimate what we think that sales price will be. So note that oftentimes the terminal cap rate is an assumption that you give today. It's usually an independent variable that you define today. And you're defining it today so that you can help estimate the expected sales price. So you're not normally working backwards to figure out what the terminal cap rate is. You're actually defining terminal cap today and using it to help estimate expected sales price. So just to begin to wrap up, I thought it'd be important to take a look at how each one of these different cap rates plays into a snapshot pro forma. So in the top half of this pro forma, we have all the estimated cash flows. So NOI through time, purchase price, leverage, equity, and the amount of cash flow that we actually generate after debt. And then down at the bottom, we have each one of the different cap rate measures. So just to highlight each, the overall or the going in cap rate, NOI divided by purchase price. Next is cash on cash. That's annual cash flow divided by equity contributed. Next is the lender's cap rate, NOI divided by loan borrowed, also known as debt yield. And finally is the terminal cap rate, the NOI in that last year divided by the resale price. So this summarizes each one of the major kinds of cap rates, but make no mistake, there are different kinds, again, depending on maybe who you are in the transaction, the borrower or the lender, or maybe where you are in the transaction, the beginning or the end, or if you're trying to estimate what that cap or what that yield could be with or without leverage, the overall or the equity cap rate. So I hope you found this video helpful. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.